Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his face as he stirred the big pot of stew. The kitchen was hot and filled with the smell of cooking meat and vegetables. He had been working since dawn, preparing meals for the 300 people who lived. In the mining colony on Kepler 44b, it was hard work, but Jake loved cooking. He found peace in making food that helped people feel better after their long days in the mines. The colony was small, but busy. Families had come here 5 years ago to dig for rare metals that Earth needed. Jake had followed his sister Lisa here. After their parents died, Lisa worked in the mines while Jake ran the main kitchen that fed everyone. They were not rich, but they were happy. Jake was cutting vegetables when the alarm started ringing. The loud sound made everyone stop what they were doing. People looked at each other with worried faces. The alarm only rang when something very bad was happening. "All people must go to the safe rooms now," a voice said over the speakers. "This is not a drill. Enemy ships are coming." Jake dropped his knife and ran outside. In the sky, he could see huge black ships coming down like angry clouds. They were bigger than anything he had ever seen. The ships had strange shapes, like they were made by something that was not human. Lisa. Jake shouted, running toward the mines. He had to find his sister. People were running everywhere, screaming and crying. Children were calling for their parents, but before Jake could reach the mines, bright lights shot down from the ships. The lights hit the ground and made loud explosions. Buildings started to break apart. Jake fell down as the ground shook under his feet. When he looked up, he saw creatures coming out of the lights. They were huge, with scales that shined like metal. They had long necks, big wings, and eyes that glowed like fire. Dragons. Real dragons, but not like the ones in old stories. These dragons wore armor and carried weapons that shot beams of light. The dragons moved fast, catching people before they could run away. Jake saw his neighbors being grabbed by the huge claws. Some people tried to fight, but the dragons were too strong and too many. Jake tried to crawl away, but a shadow fell over him. He looked up and saw a dragon looking down at him. The dragon was smaller than the others, but still much bigger than any human. Its scales were dark blue, and its eyes were bright yellow. "This one is young and healthy," the dragon said in a voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. Jake was surprised that he could understand the words. "He will work well." The dragon picked Jake up like he was a child. Jake tried to fight, but the dragon's claws were too strong. He was put into a cage with other people from the colony. He looked around for Lisa, but could not see her anywhere. "Lisa," he called out. "Lisa, where are you?" An old man next to him shook his head. "The mines collapsed when they attacked," he said quietly. No one got out. Jake felt like his heart was breaking. His sister was gone. Everyone he knew was gone. The dragons had destroyed everything in just a few minutes. The cage was lifted into one of the big ships. Jake could see his home getting smaller and smaller as they went up. Smoke was rising from the broken buildings. The place where he had lived and worked was now just ruins. Inside the ship, Jake and the other prisoners were kept in a large room with bars. There were people from other places too, all looking scared and sad. Jake learned that the dragons called themselves Zephyrians, and they had been taking over human colonies for years. "Where are they taking us?" asked a young woman named Beth. "To their home world," said a man who had been captured before. "They use humans as slaves. Some work in mines, some in factories, some in houses." The trip took many days. Jake spent the time thinking about Lisa and trying not to cry. He also watched the dragons who brought them food. The dragons were smart and organized, but they treated humans like animals. When they finally arrived at the Zephyrian homeworld, Jake could not believe what he saw. The planet was covered with huge cities made of crystal and metal. The buildings were tall and beautiful, but also scary. Everything was made for creatures much bigger than humans. The prisoners were taken to a large building in the center of the biggest city. Jake learned that this was the palace of the Dragon Queen, the ruler of all Zephyrians. The palace was so big that Jake could not see the end of it. A dragon in fancy armor looked at all the prisoners. "You will work for the queen," he said. Some of you will clean, some will build, some will serve food. Work hard and you will live. Try to escape or fight and you will die. Jake was put in a group that would work in the kitchens. He was glad about this because cooking was what he knew how to do. Maybe if he worked hard, he could stay alive long enough to find a way to escape. The dragon kitchens were huge, with pots, big enough for a person to sit in. The food was strange too. Dragons ate meat, but also things that Jake had never seen before. The head cook was an old human woman named Mary, who had been working there for 10 years. Keep your head down and do what they tell you, Mary told Jake. The queen is not as mean as some dragons, but she is still dangerous. Never look her in the eyes, and never speak unless you are asked a question. Jake nodded and started learning. How to cook food for dragons? He thought about Lisa every day, and promised himself that he would find a way to make the dragons pay for what they had done. But first, he had to survive. Jake had been working in the dragon kitchen for 3 weeks, when everything changed. He was cleaning the big pots when he heard loud voices coming from the dining hall. The voices sounded angry and worried. Mary, the old cook, came running into the kitchen. Her face was white with fear. Something is wrong with the queen's cubs, she said, breathing hard. They won't eat anything. It's been 5 days now. Jake stopped cleaning. Cubs, he asked. Queen's children, Mary explained. 3 young dragons. They are very important. If something happens to them, the queen will be very angry. She might kill all of us. Jake could hear more voices now. Dragons were talking fast in their language, but some were speaking in human. Words too. He heard words like sick and dying and nothing works. A huge dragon with red scales came into the kitchen. This was Captain Thyron, one of the queen's most important soldiers. All the human workers stopped what they were doing and looked down at the floor. You humans, Captain, Thyron said in his deep voice. Do any of you know about feeding young creatures? The humans stayed quiet. They were too scared to speak. Captain Thrin walked around the kitchen, looking at each person. I said, do any of you know about feeding young creatures? He said again, louder this time. Jake felt his heart beating fast. He knew about cooking and feeding people, but he was scared to speak. What if he said the wrong thing? But then he thought about the young dragons who were not eating. When he was a child, he had sometimes stopped eating when he was sad or scared. Maybe the dragon cubs were feeling the same way. I know about cooking, Jake said quietly, still looking at the floor. Captain Thurin stopped walking. What did you say, human? Jake lifted his head a little. I know about cooking. I was a cook. Before you captured me, sometimes when young ones won't eat, it's because the food doesn't smell right or taste right to them. The other humans looked at Jake like he was crazy. Nobody talked to dragons unless they were asked a direct question. Captain Thyron stared at Jake for a long time. You think you can make the royal cubs eat? I don't know, Jake said, but maybe I can try different ways of making food. Sometimes young creatures need food that smells like home or feels safe to them. Captain Thyron made a sound like laughing, but not in a happy way. The royal doctors have tried everything. The best cooks in the empire have tried everything. But you, a human slave, think you can help? Jake wanted to run away and hide, but he stayed where he was. I just know that when I was young, I sometimes wouldn't eat when I was scared or sad. Maybe the cubs are feeling something like that? Captain Thyron looked at Jake for another long moment. Then he grabbed Jake's arm with his big claw. Come with me, human. The queen will decide if your idea is stupid or if it might work. Jake was taken through the huge palace halls. He had never been in this part of the palace before. The walls were covered with pictures of dragons and battles. The ceiling was so high that Jake could barely see it. They came to a large room with a golden door. Captain Theron knocked on the door and waited. Enter, came a voice from inside. The voice was deep and powerful, but Jake could hear worry in it too. The door opened, and Jake saw the Dragon Queen for the first time. She was the biggest dragon he had ever seen, with scales that looked like black diamonds. Her eyes were bright green, and they looked very tired. In the corner of the room, Jake saw 3 young dragons lying on soft beds. They were much smaller than adult dragons, about the size of large horses. Their scales were not bright like their mother's. They looked thin and weak. "My queen," Captain Thyron said, bowing his head. "This human says he might know why the cubs won't eat." Queen Veilthara looked at Jake. When their eyes met, Jake felt like she could see inside his mind. Quickly looked down at the floor. "Speak, human," the queen said. Jake's mouth felt dry. "Your Majesty, I think maybe the cubs are scared or sad. When young ones feel that way, they sometimes won't eat even when they're hungry." "The doctors have said they are not sick," the queen said. "Their bodies are healthy." "But maybe their hearts are not healthy," Jake said. "Maybe they need food that smells good and feels safe. Food that is made with care, not just to fill their stomachs." The queen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What do you think you can do that my best cooks cannot do?" Jake thought about his sister Lisa and how he used to cook for her when she was sad. He thought about the small things that made food special. "I can try making food that smells like home," he said. "Food that is made with love, not just skill. Sometimes that makes the difference." One of the cubs lifted his head and looked at Jake. The cub's eyes were dark blue, and Jake could see that he was very weak. "If you fail," the queen said, "and my cubs die, you will die too." Jake nodded. "I understand, Your Majesty. But if you succeed," the queen continued, "you will be rewarded." Jake was taken to a small kitchen near the cubs' room. He was given ingredients and told to try to make something the cubs would eat. Jake looked at the strange dragon foods and tried to think, what would make a young creature want to eat? He remembered cooking for the children in the colony, how they liked food that smelled good and looked interesting. He started to cook, using some of the techniques he had learned on Earth. He mixed spices in ways that the dragon cooks had never tried. He cooked the meat slowly and carefully, making sure it would be tender and easy to eat. When the food was ready, Jake carried it to the cubs' room. The queen and several other dragons were watching him. Jake put the food near the cubs and stepped back. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, one of the cubs lifted his head and sniffed the air. The cub's eyes opened wider and he moved toward the food. The cub took a small bite, then another. Soon he was eating hungrily. The other two cubs smelled the food and came over too. In a few minutes, all three cubs were eating for the first time in 5 days. The queen stared at Jake like she could not believe what she was seeing. "How did you do this?" she asked. Jake smiled a little. "I cooked with love, Your Majesty. That's what makes the difference." After that day, Jake's life in the palace changed completely. The queen ordered that he would be the one to cook all the meals for her 3 cubs. Jake was given a small room near the cubs' living area in his own cooking space. The 3 cubs were named Kithros, Nexa, and Viros. Kithros was the oldest, with dark blue scales and curious eyes. Nexa was the only female, with silver scales that shined in the light. Viros was the youngest, with green scales and a playful nature. At first, Jake was scared to be around the young dragons. Even though they were small compared to adult dragons, they were still much bigger and stronger than him. But as the days passed, Jake began to see that the cubs were more like children than monsters. Kythros was always asking questions. "Why do you cook the meat that way?" he would ask Jake. "Why do you add those plants to the food?" Jake would explain what he was doing as he cooked. "The herbs make the meat taste better," he would say. "Cooking it slowly makes it easier for you to eat." Nexa was quieter than her brothers, but she watched everything Jake did. She seemed to understand that Jake was different from the other humans in the palace. When Jake was cooking, she would lie down nearby and watch him work. Viros was the most playful. He would try to help Jake by bringing him things, though sometimes he brought the wrong things. Once he brought Jake a rock instead of a spice jar. Jake laughed, and Viros seemed happy that he had made Jake smile. The cubs began to follow Jake around when they were not eating or sleeping. At first, the dragon guards did not like this. But the queen had said that Jake was important for keeping her cubs healthy, so they could not stop it. Jake started telling the cubs stories while he cooked. He told them about life on Earth, about the ocean and mountains and forests. He told them about animals that lived on Earth, like cats and dogs, and birds. "What is a cat?" Nexa asked one day. "Cat is a small animal with soft fur," Jake explained. They like to sleep in warm places, and they make a sound called purring when they are happy. The cubs found these stories very interesting. Adult dragons never told them about other worlds or other creatures. Adult dragons only talked about fighting and conquering. Jake also taught the cubs games from Earth. He showed them how to play simple word games and counting games. The cubs loved these games because they had never played anything like them before. One day, while Jake was cooking and the cubs were playing a game he had taught them, Queen Vale Thara came to watch. She stood in the doorway for a long time, just looking at her children. Jake noticed the queen watching, but he pretended not to see her. He continued cooking and talking with the cubs like normal. "Tell us the story about the dog again," Vero said. "Which dog story?" Jake asked. "The one where the dog saves the little human child from the water?" Kithro said. Jake smiled and began telling the story. It was about a brave dog who jumped into a river to save a child who had fallen in. The cubs loved this story because it showed how one creature could care about another creature, even if they were different. As Jake told the story, he saw Queen Vale Thara step into the room. The cubs saw their mother and ran to her. "Mother, Jake was telling us about dogs," Nexus said. "They are loyal and brave, just like dragon warriors." "But dogs are small and weak," Veros added. "How can they be brave?" Queen Vale Thara looked at Jake. "How do you answer that question, human?" Jake was nervous, but he answered honestly. "Being brave doesn't mean being big or strong, Your Majesty. It means doing the right thing, even when you are scared." The queen thought about this. "And you think small creatures can do the right thing?" "Yes, Your Majesty. I have seen small creatures do very brave things." From that day, Queen Vale Thara began visiting the cubs more often when Jake was with them. She would listen to his stories and watch him teach her children. Jake could see that she was thinking about things she had never thought about before, but not everyone in the palace was happy about Jake's new importance. Captain Thyron did not like that a human slave was spending so much time with the royal family. One day, Tana Thyron came to Jake's cooking area when the cubs were sleeping. "You are getting too comfortable, human," he said in a low voice. Forget that you are a slave." Jake kept working, but his hands were shaking. "I am just doing what the queen ordered me to do." "The queen does not see what I see," Captain Thuran said. "I see a human who is getting ideas above his position. I see someone who might be dangerous. I just want to keep the cubs healthy." Jake said, "The cubs would be fine without you," Captain Thyron said. "They ate before you came, and they will eat after you are gone." That same day, Jake met another human prisoner who worked in the palace archives. Her name was Zara Collins. She had been captured from a research station 2 years ago. Zara was smart and had learned to read some of the dragon language. She worked with the palace records and maps. "I've been watching you," Zara said, when they were alone in a storage room. "You've done something amazing with the cubs." "I just cook for them," Jake said. "It's more than that," Zara said. "You're changing how they think. I can see it in the records I work with. The queen is asking questions about humans that she never asked before." Zara looked around to make sure no one could hear them. Then she said something that made Jake's blood turn cold. "I've seen the invasion plans," she whispered. "They're planning to attack more human colonies. Hundreds of thousands of people will die or become slaves." Jake felt sick. "When? Soon? Maybe in a few months?" "But Jake, I think you might be able to change things. The queen listens to you because of what you've done with her cubs." Jake thought about all the people who would suffer like he had suffered. He thought about families being torn apart like his family had been torn apart. "What can I do?" he asked. "I don't know yet," Zara said. "But keep doing what you're doing with the cubs. Keep making the queen think about humans differently. Maybe there's a way to stop this." That night, Jake lay in his small bed thinking about everything Zara had told him. He thought about the cubs, who had become like his own children. He thought about Queen Vale Thora, who was starting to see humans as more than just slaves. But he also thought about Captain Thyron, who was watching him carefully and waiting for him to make a mistake. Jake knew that his life was in danger, but now he also knew that many other lives might depend on what he did next. The cubs trusted him, but could he find a way to use that trust to save his own people? Captain Thyron had been watching Jake for weeks, waiting for the right moment to act. He believed that Jake was becoming too important to the royal family, and that was dangerous. No human slave should have so much influence over the future rulers of the empire. One morning, Captain Thyron put his plan into action. He came to Jake's cooking area when Jake was preparing breakfast for the cubs. "Human," he said in a loud voice, "I have important news for you to hear." Jake looked up from the meat he was cutting. The cubs were playing nearby, but they stopped to listen when they heard Captain Thyron's serious voice. "The Queen has decided to attack the human colony on Proxima 7 next month," Captain Thyron said, speaking clearly so Jake would hear every word. "It is a big colony with many humans. It will all become slaves or die." Jake's knife fell from his hand. Proxima 7 was where his cousin Ben lived with his family. Thousands of people lived there, including many children. "Why are you telling me this?" Jake asked, his voice shaking. "Because the Queen wants you to know that your people cannot hide from us," Captain Thyron said with a cruel smile. "We will find every human colony and take them all." After Captain Thyron left, Jake felt sick to his stomach. He tried to continue cooking, but his hands were shaking so much that he could barely hold his tools. Kithros noticed that something was wrong. "Jake, why do you look sad?" the young dragon asked. "I'm fine," Jake said, but his voice did not sound fine at all. That night, Jake found a way to secretly meet with Zara in the archives room. "They're going to attack Proxima 7, he told her quietly. "My cousin lives there." Zara looked worried. "Are you sure?" "I haven't seen any orders about that. Captain Thyron told me himself," Jake said. He seemed very happy about it. Zara thought for a moment. "Jake, I think this might be a trap. Thyron has been trying to find a reason to get rid of you. Maybe he's lying to see what you will do." "But what if he's not lying?" Jake asked. "What if they really are going to attack?" "Then we need to find a way to warn them," Zara said. "We have to be very careful." Jake spent the next few days trying to act normal around the cubs and the Queen, but it was very hard. He kept thinking about his cousin Ben and Ben's 2 little daughters. If the dragons attacked, those little girls might end up like Jake. Taken from their family and made into slaves, the cubs could tell that something was bothering Jake. They tried to cheer him up by playing games and asking for their favorite stories. But Jake found it hard to smile. "Jake doesn't seem happy anymore," Nexa said to her mother one day, when Queen Valthara came to visit. The Queen looked at Jake, who was cooking quietly in the corner. "Human," she said, "come here." Jake walked over to the Queen and bowed his head. "My children say you are not happy," the Queen said. "What is troubling you?" Jake did not know what to say. If he told the truth about Proxima 7, he might be walking into Captain Thyron's trap. But if he lied, the Queen might be able to tell. "I am just tired, Your Majesty," Jake said. Queen Valthora studied Jake's face. "I do not think that is the whole truth," she said, "but I will not force you to speak." 2 days later, Captain Thyron came to Jake again. This time he brought 2 dragon guards with him. "Human," he said, "we have discovered that you have been trying to send messages to other humans." Jake's heart started beating very fast. That's not true," he said. "We have proof," Captain Thyron said. "You were seen talking to the human female who works in the archives. You were planning to warn your people about our attacks." The cubs, who had been playing nearby, came running over when they heard the angry voices. "What's happening?" Kithros asked. "This human has been lying to us," Captain Thyron said to the cubs. "He has been trying to help our enemies." "Jake wouldn't do that," Viro said. "Jake is our friend." "Jake is a slave," Captain Thyron said firmly. "Slaves cannot be friends with dragons. This human has forgotten his place, and now he must be punished." Queen Valthera entered the room, having heard the commotion. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. Captain Thyron bowed to the Queen. "My Queen, this human slave has been trying to betray us. He has been planning to send information to his people to help them fight against us." The Queen looked at Jake. "Is this true?" Jake knew that his life depended on his next words. He could lie and maybe save himself, but then he would never be able to help his people, or he could tell the truth and face whatever punishment came. The cubs were looking at him with worried eyes. They did not understand what was happening, but they could see that Jake was in trouble. "Your Majesty," Jake said slowly, "I have never sent any messages to anyone. But if I could save innocent people from being hurt, I would want to do that." "See," Captain Thurn said. "He admits it. Cares more about humans than about serving you faithfully." "That's not what he said." Kithro spoke up suddenly. All the adults looked at the young dragon in surprise. Cubs are not supposed to speak. When adults were talking about serious matters, "Kithros, be quiet," Captain Thyron said. But Kithros continued speaking. "Jake said he would want to save innocent people. That means he cares about not hurting creatures who haven't done anything wrong. Isn't that what you taught us, Mother? That good dragons protect innocent creatures?" Queen Valthara looked at her son with surprise. She had never heard him speak so seriously about such important ideas. "And Jake takes care of us every day," Nexa added. "Could hurt us if he wanted to, because he prepares all our food. But he never hurts us. He only helps us." "Jake loves us," Vyros said simply, "and we love Jake." Captain Thyron's face became red with anger. "These cubs have been poisoned by this human's influence," he said. "This is exactly why he is dangerous. He's making them think like humans instead of like dragons." "Maybe thinking like humans is not a bad thing," Queen Valthara said quietly. Everyone in the room became very quiet. No one had ever heard the Queen say anything like that before. "My Queen," Captain Thyron said carefully, "you cannot mean that." Queen looked at Jake, then at her cubs, then back at Captain Thurin. "I have been watching this human for many weeks," she said. "I have seen how he cares for my children. I have seen how he makes them happy and helps them learn. Maybe there are things about humans that we do not understand." "But he tried to betray us," Captain Thyron insisted. "Did he?" the Queen asked. "Or did you create a situation to make him look guilty?" Captain Thyron's mouth opened, but no words came out. "I know you, Thyron," the Queen continued. "I know how much you hate humans. Did you really discover Jake sending messages, or did you tell him false information to see what he would do?" Jake held his breath, waiting for Captain Thyron's answer. Double quotes. Captain Thyron started, then stopped. "I was testing his loyalty, my Queen." "And what did you discover?" the Queen asked. "That he cares more about his own kind than about us, Captain," Thyron said. "Or," the Queen said, "that he has the ability to care about others, even when it puts him in danger. That sounds like a good quality to me." Jake could not believe what he was hearing. The Dragon Queen was defending him against her own captain. Queen Valthora stared at Captain Thyron for a long moment. The room was completely silent, except for the sound of the cubs breathing. Jake felt like his heart might stop beating. "Captain Thyron," the Queen said in a voice that was calm but dangerous. "You have disappointed me. You created this test without my permission. You lied to this human and tried to make him look like a traitor." "My Queen, I was only trying to protect the Empire," Thyron said, but his voice was not as strong as before. "By lying and creating false evidence?" the Queen asked. "That is not how honorable dragons behave." She turned to look at Jake. "Human, you will not be punished for Captain Thyron's test. But I want to hear the truth from you. There really was an attack planned against your people? Would you try to warn them?" Jake knew this was the most important question anyone had ever asked him. The cubs were watching him with worried eyes. Even Captain Thyron was waiting to hear his answer. "Majesty," Jake said slowly, "I would want to save innocent people from being hurt. But I would not want to hurt these cubs, or you. You have been fair to me, and your children have become like my own family." "So what would you do?" the Queen asked. Jake thought about this carefully. "I would ask you to find another way. A way that didn't hurt innocent people on either side." Captain Thyron made a sound of disgust. "You see, he wants us to be weak. He wants us to stop conquering because he feels sorry for his own kind." But Queen Valthara was not listening to Captain Thyron anymore. She was looking at her cubs, who had moved closer to Jake. She could see how much they cared about him, and how much he cared about them. "Jake," she said, "you have taught my children things that I never taught them. You have shown them how to care about others, how to think about whether something is right or wrong, not just whether it makes us strong," Mother Kithros said. "Jake taught us that being brave means doing the right thing, even when it's hard. Isn't that what you want us to learn? Queen Valthera nodded slowly. Yes, my son. That is exactly what I want you to learn. She stood up, and everyone in the room knew that she was about to make an important decision. Captain Thyron, she said, you are no longer welcome in this part of the palace. Your hatred for humans has made you do dishonorable things. Leave now. Captain Thyron's mouth fell open. My queen, you cannot be serious. You would choose a human slave over your own captain. I'm choosing what is right over what is easy, the queen said. Jake has shown more honor in these past weeks than you have shown in years. Captain Thyron left the room, his face dark with anger. Jake knew that he had made a dangerous enemy, but he also knew that the queen was protecting him. After Captain Thyron was gone, Queen Valthara sat down near her cubs. Jake, she said, I have been thinking about many things lately. I have been watching how you care for my children and how they have changed since you came here. How have they changed? Your Majesty? Jake asked. They think about others now, she said. They ask questions about right and wrong. They care about creatures that are smaller and weaker than they are. These are not things that young dragons usually learn. Nexa looked up at her mother. Are these bad things to learn? No, my daughter, the queen said. I think they are very good things to learn. I think they will make you better rulers someday. Over the next few days, Queen Valthara spent more time talking with Jake. She asked him about human families, about how humans raise their children, about why humans helped each other even when they got nothing in return. Jake told her about his sister Lisa and how they had taken care of each other after their parents died. He told her about the colony where everyone worked together to build a good life for their families. But you were not the strongest creatures on your world, the queen said. How did you survive without conquering others? You survived by helping each other, Jake explained. When one family had problems, other families would help them. When someone was sick, others would take care of them. We got stronger by working together, not by fighting each other. The queen thought about this for a long time. And you think this way of living could work for dragons too? I think it could work for anyone, Jake said. But it requires trust. And it requires caring about others as much as you care about yourself. A week later, Queen Valthera called a meeting of all her important advisors. Jake was surprised when she asked him to come to the meeting too. The meeting room was huge, filled with the most powerful dragons in the Empire. When they saw Jake enter the room, many of them looked angry and confused. Why is there a human slave in this meeting? One of them asked. Because Queen Valthara said, this human has taught me something important. He has shown me that there might be a better way to build our empire than through conquest and slavery. The dragons began talking loudly all at once. Some were angry, some were confused, and some seemed interested in what the queen was saying. Queen Valthara raised her hand for silence. I've decided that we will not attack any more human colonies, she announced. The room exploded with shocked voices. My queen, one advisor said. Conquering new worlds is how we get stronger. It is how we have always lived. But what if we could get stronger in a different way? The queen asked. What if we could make allies instead of slaves? What if we could trade with humans instead of conquering them? Allies. Another dragon said. Humans are weak. What could they possibly offer us? Jake felt scared, but he knew. This was his chance to help both his people and the dragons. Your Majesty, may I speak? The queen nodded. Humans have many skills that dragons don't have, Jake said, his voice shaking a little. We are good at growing food, at making medicines, at building things that last. We're also good at solving problems by working together. And what would dragons offer in return? The queen asked. Protection, Jake said, and knowledge. Dragons are much older and wiser than humans. You could teach us about space travel, about science, about many things we don't understand. The meeting went on for hours. Many dragons were against the queen's idea, but some began to see that it might work. In the end, Queen Valthara made the final decision. We will try this new way, she announced. Jake will be our first human ambassador. He will help us learn how to work with humans instead of conquering them. 6 months later, Jake stood on the deck of a dragon ship as it approached Earth. but this time he was not a prisoner. He was an ambassador, carrying a message of peace. Between dragons and humans, the cubs had grown bigger and stronger, and they were coming with him to meet humans for the first time. They were excited to see the ocean and the forests that Jake had told them about in his stories. Kithros said as they looked down at the blue and green planet, "Do you think humans and dragons can really be friends?" Jake smiled and put his hand on the young dragon's neck. "I think if we can be friends, then anyone can be friends." Queen Valthera stood beside them, watching her children and the human who had changed their lives. "The greatest strength comes from choosing kindness over cruelty, and cooperation over conquest." Jake thought about his sister Lisa and wished she could see this moment. He had found a way to honor her memory by helping create peace between their peoples. The dragon cubs had refused food from everyone except him, but they had given him something much more valuable in return. They had given him hope for a better future for everyone.